A few years ago, I encountered a man on Craigslist in the casual encounters section. At first, I had no idea what he looked like, but he had a relaxed demeanor. He described himself, and after a week or so of chatting, he sent me ordinary photos of himself with his family, just typical vacation snaps from Disneyland during his childhood. Unlike many on casual encounters, this man was single and not in a relationship. He grew up in a family with 2 parents, a younger brother and a sister, which gave me the impression he was genuinely single and seeking connection. However, I found it odd when he shared photos from his late teens, even though he was in his late 20s at the time. Being in my early 40s, I wasn't actively seeking casual encounters, but disliked the solitude of living alone. While I wasn't desperate enough to meet up with just any man, I realized my social skills in meeting new people, particularly men I found interesting, were lacking. My evenings were often spent browsing dating apps and sites, more out of curiosity than anything else. As a woman, I received plenty of matches and messages, but they were mostly mundane and repetitive, with typical greetings like, "Hey, how are you?" or "You're cute." The few men who stood out with their interesting conversations often didn't appeal to me physically, or didn't match my preferences. That's when a friend suggested trying the casual encounters section on Craigslist, where she had met some decent guys. Though skeptical, I decided to give it a shot. I had been conversing with this man, whom I'll call James, for about a month before considering a meeting. Our chats weren't daily, but happened every other night on average. We exchanged stories about our pasts, hobbies, and aspirations. He was studying automotive engineering at a nearby college, just a 5-minute drive or a 20-minute walk from where I lived. Since we were close by, I suggested meeting up, which was peculiar because he hadn't initiated it himself, a contrast to men on other dating apps who often wanted to meet immediately. Yet Jamie seemed content with just online conversations. However, I desired a real-life relationship, not an endless digital one. As we approached the 1-month mark, the situation grew increasingly absurd. Despite many interested parties on other dating apps, I found myself more attracted to James than anyone else. I had invested time getting to know him, his ambitions, and values over many evenings. Based on the pictures he sent of himself at 19, he was undoubtedly attractive. But our plan to meet in person led to an unexpected twist. We tried to arrange a meeting twice. The first time, James canceled last minute, citing busyness and the need to reschedule. Understandably, I was frustrated. The second time, we agreed to meet at a local cafe. Before that, we planned to meet halfway between our residences and walk together to the cafe. The idea was to chat along the way and then enjoy a drink. He promised to accompany me back to the halfway point afterward, as we both wanted to keep our addresses private until ensuring neither was a threat. On a sunny Saturday afternoon in July, I walked to our agreed meeting spot, slightly sweating from the heat. I anticipated cooling off in the cafe with some refreshing drinks. I arrived at the rendezvous at 1:30 p.m., our set time, but James wasn't there. While I understand that delays happen, standing there without my phone made me feel increasingly awkward among the bustling crowd. His place overlooked a shopping district, so identifying him among the passersby was challenging given I only knew his younger appearance. After waiting for 40 minutes, I felt embarrassed and decided to head home. Once there, I found nearly 100 missed messages and calls from James on my phone, all describing how I looked standing there alone with unsettling compliments. A wave of nausea hit me as I realized he had been observing me, possibly from his apartment, engaging in inappropriate behavior. It dawned on me that the meeting spot was likely near his residence, and he had spent the time watching me instead of joining me. Disturbed, I immediately reported him to the police and blocked him on all platforms, including deleting my Craigslist account and his number. After this experience, I vowed never to meet someone online again. Instead, I began attending local clubs and group events, advocating for others to meet people in safer, more genuine ways. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of online encounters and the importance of personal safety. For several weeks, I'd been scouring online listings for a suitable room to rent, focusing my search on affordable options with inclusive bills and a reasonable security deposit. The challenge was that most listings on the site either exceeded my budget or had undisclosed additional fees. My job at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C., necessitated finding a place not too far from work. Unfortunately, I was under a time crunch. The house where I was currently staying was being sold, leaving me and my housemates just 6 weeks to relocate. 4 weeks had already passed, leaving me with only 2 weeks to secure a new living situation, and I was growing increasingly anxious. Then, on a Thursday evening, I stumbled upon a promising ad on an online marketplace. It advertised a room with all bills included and a minimal security deposit. The photos showcased a decent-looking space, and, remarkably, it was only a 10-minute walk from the museum. I immediately contacted the landlord, now named Mr. Thompson, expressing my interest, and arranged to view the room the next afternoon at 3 p.m. Arriving punctually the following day, I approached the large, slightly worn house and used an intricate brass knocker, as there was no doorbell. Mr. Thompson, a man appearing to be in his early 50s, greeted me warmly. He informed me that some interior renovations were underway, which could result in daytime noise. I assured him this wouldn't be an issue as I'd be at work most days. He clarified that the work was scheduled only on weekdays and then led me upstairs to show me the room. The room was pleasantly tidy and spacious, furnished with essentials like a bed, a wardrobe, a desk, and a few chairs. Unfortunately, there was no television, but Mr. Thompson inquired if I had my own, mentioning there was an antenna hookup on the opposite wall. He then guided me to the nearby bathroom, boasting both a shower and a bathtub, giving me the choice of bathing preferences. Although the room's style was somewhat dated, it was perfectly serviceable. Mr. Thompson added that more rooms were being prepared for future tenants, but it would likely be a few months before anyone else moved in. I was content with this and agreed to move in immediately. Mr. Thompson explained that I could move in as soon as the first month's rent and the security deposit were paid. He produced a lease agreement, which stipulated a 6-month term with an option to renew for another 6. After a cursory read, I signed the document, promising to deliver the payment by Wednesday, and inquired if a Thursday move-in would be possible. He consented, and the arrangement was set. On Thursday, I parked my rented moving van outside and was joined by my colleague and friend, Sarah, from the museum. Her assistance was invaluable, given my petite stature. We rang the bell, and Mr. Thompson appeared to hand over the keys, marked with an S for Sarah, my name on the contract. His faint smile seemed odd, but I dismissed it as nerves. He then shared that he had been living alone since his wife's passing and his daughter's enrollment in a university out of state. He showed me his room at the end of the downstairs hallway in case I needed anything. After a long day of moving and settling in, followed by a hasty dinner of microwaved lasagna, I attempted to watch some TV but gave up due to poor reception. Opting to scroll through my phone instead, I soon retired to bed, exhausted. Sometime during the night, I awoke with a sense that someone was in my room, moving quietly. Paralyzed with fear, I contemplated screaming or fleeing, but was too scared to move. Then I heard a voice. Mr. Thompson. Sitting up, I confronted him, and he claimed he had entered using a master key after hearing me scream in my sleep, but I had no recollection of such a thing. His explanation about a fuse issue causing the earlier blackout seemed dubious. The lights flickered back on, and I heard a commotion downstairs. Dressed hastily, I investigated and found Mr. Thompson unconscious near a fuse box, apparently having fallen from a ladder. While waiting for emergency services, I discovered a concealed area behind a curtain, revealing monitors that displayed feeds from hidden cameras in my room and bathroom. Horrified, I immediately contacted the police. Mr. Thompson was arrested following his recovery. The police uncovered recordings of several previous tenants, uncovering his long history of voyeurism. It turned out his story about his family was fabricated to appear trustworthy. Fortunately, my confrontational response that night possibly prevented a more sinister outcome. He was later convicted and sentenced, providing some solace. However, the ordeal has left me perpetually cautious, always meticulously inspecting any new rental for hidden surveillance to ensure my privacy and safety. This incident occurred when I was about 17, and I am now 26. Back then, I lived with my father in our old family home, where I had spent my entire childhood. At that time, we didn't have any pets, and I was alone in the house. My bed, a twin size, was positioned in the corner of my small bedroom with the headboard furthest from the door. This arrangement was deliberate, as I had previously seen unsettling shadows near the door at night. One night, I was lying in bed, facing the wall with my back to the door. I started hearing footsteps and assumed it was my father getting up. But these steps halted right outside my bedroom. I heard the distinct sound of the door brushing against the carpet as it opened, a sound it never made unless someone was pushing it, given the thickness of the carpet. Initially, I thought my father was checking in on me, as I often stayed up late. He entered silently, not uttering a word. I lay there, motionless, for what felt like an eternity, trying to fall back asleep. That's when the footsteps resumed, this time inside my room. The steps were light, like a small child in slippers moving cautiously across the carpet. As the footsteps drew nearer to my bed, I felt a chilling terror. I was frozen in fear, imagining a grotesque, dark-eyed child looming over me. I wanted to scream, but I was paralyzed and mute. Then, I distinctly felt one side of the bed depress, as if someone was sitting next to me. Frozen with fear, I tightly shut my eyes, hoping the presence would vanish. Time seemed to stretch endlessly until, suddenly, I felt what would be the peak of this horrifying encounter. A small hand tapped my back 3 times, and a child's voice whispered, "Daddy?" In a flash of panic, I leaped out of bed and dashed to the light switch near the door. Flicking the lights on, I found my room empty, with no sign of any presence or disturbance. While I had experienced odd occurrences before, this was the first time I had been physically touched by an unseen entity. This experience, undoubtedly, is one that will haunt me for the rest of my life. In July of 2010, I found myself tirelessly hunting for the perfect dress to wear at my cousin's upcoming wedding. As my budget was tight and I knew I'd only wear the dress once, I turned to online platforms like Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. After some searching, I stumbled upon a dress that captured my heart with its unique style and vibrant colors. Filled with excitement, I reached out to the seller on Craigslist and arranged to meet her at her residence the following day to purchase the dress. However, apprehension washed over me when she shared her address. The neighborhood had a notorious reputation for being unsafe, especially for women, with numerous unsettling incidents reported. The area, located in a dilapidated rural town, was lined with desolate houses, heightening my unease as I drove by. I double-checked the address to ensure I was in the right place, keen on avoiding any trouble in such a neighborhood. The house, when I arrived, seemed to exude an aura fit for the peculiar and intense characters one might expect in such a place. Greeting me at the door was a woman, appearing much older and wearier than I had anticipated. Dark, pronounced circles under her eyes and her parched skin did little to ease my growing discomfort. She led me inside, where the dress was casually hung on a door handle in the living room. It was just as beautiful as in the photos, and in my nervousness I decided against trying it on, instead holding it up against myself to gauge the fit. As I handed over the money for the dress, the seller's behavior took a strange turn. Her eyes darted around the room, and she seemed fraught with anxiety, as if bracing for some imminent danger. I couldn't tell if her actions stemmed from drug use or a mental condition. Suddenly, in the midst of our transaction, she lunged at me. I narrowly evaded her attack and fled the house, hearing her pursuit close behind. Once safely in my car with the doors locked, she began pounding on the windows, trying to force her way in. I drove off at a dangerous speed, her screams echoing in my ears. The drive home was filled with tears and confusion. My mind raced to make sense of the incident, my hands trembling uncontrollably on the steering wheel. I replayed the event repeatedly, trying to fathom why the woman had attacked me. Upon reaching home, I immediately contacted the police and recounted the entire ordeal. They promised to investigate the area, but weeks passed without any updates, leaving me with unanswered questions about the woman's motives. Haunted by the incident and the woman's terrifying gaze, I suffered from nightmares where she relentlessly chased me. Seeking closure, I resolved to return to the house, this time accompanied by my uncle and cousins, armed with pepper spray and a stun gun for protection. To our surprise, we found nothing but an empty lot where the house once stood, with only scattered debris caught in the afternoon breeze. Inquiring with a neighbor, we learned that the woman had been institutionalized following an incident where she bit another neighbor. The bite had transmitted a rare mycelium infection, which had also infected her bloodstream and brain, possibly explaining her erratic behavior. Knowing she was receiving the necessary care brought a sense of relief, yet the memories of that day lingered, a reminder of an encounter that was as bizarre as it was frightening.